Daniel was never the type to explode, but that afternoon something inside him snapped. His closest friend, Evan, had been teasing him about a small mistake during basketball practice, and the laughter that followed cut deeper than it should have. Words slipped from Daniel's mouth like shards of glass, sharp and unfiltered. He called Evan careless, mocked his clumsy playing, and added things he didn't truly mean, things that made the air heavy and still. For a moment, silence replaced the sound of bouncing balls, and Evan's face changed. The usual light in his eyes dimmed, as if someone had turned off a lamp. The weight of those words settled in almost immediately, but Daniel's pride rose like a shield. He told himself it wasn't that serious, that Evan would brush it off like always. Yet, deep down, he knew the wound was real. That night, lying in bed, the moment replayed in his mind, the way Evan's shoulders sank, the way he quietly walked away without saying anything. It all gnawed at him. He wanted to say sorry the very next day, but hesitation pinned him down. What if Evan laughed at him? What if he acted as if the apology was unnecessary? Worse yet, what if he rejected it? These thoughts tangled together, creating a knot inside Daniel's chest. So instead of speaking, he stayed silent, pretending everything was normal. But everything wasn't normal. At school, Evan kept his distance. He didn't sit with Daniel at lunch, didn't text him the way he used to. A space was forming between them, wide enough for Daniel to notice, but too frightening for him to cross. Each day that passed made the apology feel heavier, harder to deliver, as if words were turning to stone inside his throat. Daniel's teacher, Mrs. Carter, noticed his distraction. She often saw him staring out the window, lost in thought, chewing the inside of his cheek. She didn't ask questions, only gave him a knowing look, the kind that said she could see what he was carrying, even if he tried to hide it. Daniel wanted to fix things, but he convinced himself he still had time. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow I'll tell him. But tomorrow kept slipping away, and with each delay, the distance between Daniel and Evan grew larger, like a crack spreading across glass, threatening to shatter what had once been unbreakable. He didn't know it then, but those unspoken words were already carving a place in his memory, a place he would never escape. The days that followed became a quiet battlefield inside Daniel's mind. Every morning he rehearsed the words he should have said yesterday. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror, whispering apologies to his own reflection, hoping that when the time came, they would flow as easily. Yet, when he saw Evan at school, the courage dissolved. His mouth went dry, and his feet carried him past with only a nod or a forced smile. The words stayed locked inside, like birds that refused to leave their cage. Evan's distance was no longer subtle. He no longer lingered near Daniel's locker or shared inside jokes during class. Instead, he sat with new faces, laughing with an ease that made Daniel's chest ache. Their once unshakable bond seemed fragile now, like paper left out in the rain. Daniel felt both guilty and angry, guilty for what he had said, and angry at himself for letting silence destroy what they had built together. Mrs. Carter must have sensed the storm brewing. One afternoon, as the last students filed out of her classroom, she stopped Daniel with a gentle hand on his shoulder. Her voice was calm, almost tender. She didn't ask for details, but said something that pierced through him. She told him that unsaid words often grow heavier than mistakes themselves, and that silence has a way of becoming permanent if left too long. Her words lingered like an echo in Daniel's chest, but still, fear held him hostage. That night, Daniel promised himself that the next day he would finally speak. He imagined walking up to Evan, stopping him in the hallway, and saying the apology he had carried like a stone in his heart. He even wrote it down in his notebook, as if putting it on paper would make it real. But the next morning, fate struck cruelly. Daniel arrived at school to find whispers circulating through the halls. Evan wasn't there. By lunchtime, the news reached him. Evan had moved away suddenly. His father's job had relocated them to another city overnight. There was no farewell, no last conversation, no chance to close the wound with words. Daniel stood frozen in the crowded cafeteria, the noise around him blurring into a dull hum. The notebook in his bag carried the apology that would never be spoken, and it felt heavier than all his textbooks combined. For the first time, he realized the terrifying truth: he had waited too long, and now the silence was final. The apology that lived inside him had turned into a ghost, haunting him with every passing day. Daniel spent the following weeks drifting through school like a shadow. The seat beside him in class remained empty, and the silence of that absence spoke louder than any words. He would catch himself turning to say something to Evan, only to face the hollow space where his friend used to be. Each reminder stung, like salt pressed into an open wound. At first, he clung to denial. He told himself maybe Evan would visit, maybe they'd reconnect one day, maybe he'd still get a chance to make things right. But as days turned into weeks, the truth settled in. The chance was gone. The apology he had carried in his heart had no place to land anymore. It was like writing a letter and never sending it, leaving it to gather dust in a drawer. Mrs. Carter noticed the heaviness in him, and one afternoon, gently spoke again. She told him that life is full of doors that close without warning, and sometimes we don't get to open them again. But she reminded him of something important, that regret, while painful, can become a teacher. Daniel listened quietly, her words sinking into the cracks of his heart. He began to reflect more deeply. He thought about how icily pride had silenced him, how he had allowed fear of rejection to outweigh the importance of speaking the truth. He realized the mistake was not only in the hurtful words he had said, but in the many words he never said afterward. That silence had cost him something precious, and now he carried it like a permanent scar. Over time, Daniel changed. He became more careful with his words, not because he feared mistakes, but because he understood their weight. He also learned to speak sooner, to apologize, before silence built walls too high to climb. Though Evan was gone, Daniel honored his memory by choosing courage over hesitation in the relationships he still had. Years later, when asked about the most important lesson he had learned as a teenager, Daniel never spoke of sports or grades. Instead, he shared the story of the apology that never came. He told others that words left unspoken can follow you for a lifetime, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is to say them while there is still time. Though he never got to mend that one broken bond, he carried the lesson forward. The apology that never came became the compass guiding him toward honesty, humility, and love. There are moments in life that carve themselves into our memory, not because of what we did, but because of what we left undone. Daniel's story is a quiet reminder that silence can be as sharp as any word, and regret often lingers longer than anger. If there is something unsaid resting in your heart, speak it today before time decides for you. Thank you for joining this journey of reflection. If this story touched you, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing so that more people can find comfort and lessons in stories like this one.